Hello, we are Team 6 and we are talking about respiratory system. Our team members are
Saramatuk,
Pablo Corpi,
Ian Larson,
El Marcelo Anís.
vocabulary words. Alveolar sacs. They are terminal diverticula of the bronchial tree and are counted by millions. It is where the blood is oxygenated. The oxygen diffuses through the wall of these and enters the bloodstream. It is a semi-translucent blue-gray cartilage that is present in the nose and larynx, at the ends of the ribs, in the tracheal and bronchial rings, and on surfaces of the mobile joints of the body. A repetitive cycle ending in which the entry of air, called inhalation or inspiration, and the exit of it, exhalation or expiration, occurs. These actions are involuntary. It is located in the medulla and pons in the brainstem. They receive information from other components of the nervous system, which allows adjusting the respiratory rate to the physiological needs of the individual. The central chemoreceptors record the changes in the CO2 of the cerebrospinal fluid. There are also receptors in the carotides and the aorta. Diseases are something that needs to be cured, such as infection, injury, toxic exposure, cell degeneration, etc. And they usually causes illness. Illness is something that needs to be managed, such as feelings of pain, discomfort, distress, weakness, fatigue, among others. Though diseases commonly make it feel ill, one can have a disease without having illness. Is a group of diseases involving abnormal cell growth with the potential to invade or spread to other parts of the body. This contrasts with benign tumors which do not spread. It is any circumstance or situation that increases a person's chances of contracting a disease or any other health problem. Risk factors imply that people affected by this risk factor present a higher health risk than people without these factors. Of the hormone of hormones or related to them. Hormones have substances secreted by specialized cells located in endocrine glands, or also by epithelial and interstitial cells whose purpose is to influence the function of the other cells. From the chemical point of view, they are molecules of an organic nature, mainly proteins, and they fulfill their function. That is, they are active in very small amounts.
concept and main ideas. The respiratory system is the system in living organisms that takes up oxygen and discharges carbon dioxide and energy in order to satisfy the energy requirements in the body. Main ideas. The human respiratory system is a series of organs responsible for taking in oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. The primary organs of the respiratory system are the lungs, which carry out this exchange of gases as we breathe.
respiratory system, structure and function of the structure. Function transports air with oxygen to the zone to exchange in the lung, which corresponds to the alveolar region. There, the oxygen diffuses through the walls of the alveolar sacs and enters the bloodstream, where the erythrocytes transport it. Structure and function of the respiratory system: nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, pleura, and alveoli. Function of nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, and bronchi. Nasal cavity. The air path begins in the nasal cavity, which enters through two holes called nostrils. In the hole of the nostrils, there are small hair called vibrissae, sebaceous glands, and sweat glands, that constitute the first barrier of protection against the penetration of particles. Pharynx. After its passage through the nasal cavity, air enters the nasopharynx, which is a region of the pharynx lined by the respiratory epithelium. Then air enters the larynx, which is an irregular tube that connects the pharynx with the trachea. Larynx. The mucosa of the larynx projects and forms the two pair of producing folds, constituting the so-called vocal cords, which participates in phonotation emission of sounds. When the air passes through the larynx, these muscles contract, modifying the opening of the larynx and regulating the emission of sounds with different tones by causing the vibration of true vocal cords. The trachea is a continuation of the larynx. It is made up by a tube supported by 16 to 20 rings of hyaline cartilage in the form of a C, with its ends oriented towards the posterior portion and joined by a smooth muscle. When this tissue contracts and relaxes, regulates the amount of air that enters the lung. Function of bronchi, bronchioles, pleura, and alveoli. Bronchi. The trachea branches into two primary bronchi that enter the lungs, which in turn divide themselves into three in the right lung and two in the left lung, supplying the different lung lobes. The latter corresponds to the labor bronchi. Bronchioles. As for bronchioles, that corresponds to the smaller conductive pathways. Pleura. The pleura is the layer that covers the lungs and it's made up to two sheets of connective tissue, which allows displacement of breathing movements of inhalation and exhalation. Alveoli. They are hemispherical cavities with an accommodation similar to the clusters of grapes, located at the end of the bronchi, in which the exchange of oxygen with the blood is performed.
Illness and sickness in the respiratory system. We'll be covering 5 illness and diseases being bronchitis, emphysema, asthma, lung cancer, and pulmonary tuberculosis. The bronchitis, it involves inflammation of the airways in the bronchi where the air to the lung. It is usually caused by irritative problem or infection, or it can be also by related to smoking. The risk factors can be chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The emphysema. This happens due to smoking when the alveolar walls break, which limits the surface and produces an adequate gas exchange. Due to that, when the walls of alveoli are broken, the ability of the lungs to contract is lost, therefore moving less air, and once they break, there is no way back. The asthma. This gives you episodes of coughing, shortness of breath, wheezing, and feeling of tightness in the chest due to the closing bronchi, but it can be reversible. These episodes has a higher chance of happening while inhaling cold air, doing exercise, or being exposed to an allergy. It helps a lot going to the doctor and taking the medications you are asked to regulate those problems. Lung cancer. This can be caused due to smoking, air pollution, occupation, and gender of the person. This is the most mortal and dangerous disease because it is very hard to treat cancer just alone, and when it's located in the vital organs like heart, brain, and lungs, every move has to be almost perfect to damage the least possible that organ to keep functioning. This cancer recently has been more common to women than men due for hormonal factors. This cancer has no much problem when it's detected early, but most cases it is found when the cancer is already too advanced and there's little to nothing you can do. Pulmonary tuberculosis. This is a very long known disease and is one of the most common causes of death in the 18th century. It was presented along HIV. The problem with this is that it has a causative agent, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and over the years it has acquired resistance to many treatments. The main risk factors are poverty and weak immune response from the body. And here are the references used for the presentation.